Some of the greatest teachers I've ever had have been the pain that I feel in my heart. It's taught me things about life. You know, anyone who wakes up every morning and feels great and who's like, oh, this, and faces the day, oh, this is going to be amazing. The day I don't need to work on myself, that's the day I expire. That's like my time is up. I'm fighting my way through this. We're in the struggle. You know, that's the podcast. We're struggling. Well, I can tell you how they do handle it. Okay. Horrifically. I just want to throw in, I think there's too many people smoking marijuana these days. Because a person has suffered, it doesn't necessarily give them the right to cause suffering to another. And mature love is, I have a self, you have a self, and we choose to join one another in communion.
What is trauma bonding? Okay. Today we are honored to have in our studio who is making a difference in the world. Our guest today is Dr. Akiva Perlman. He's a licensed clinical social worker, and he's also a teacher.
Yes.
You give lectures to other professionals, and you also are a professor in
Wurzweiler, Yeshiva
University.
Their graduate school. Yeah, they partner with Yeshiva University.
Correct, and that specializes in trauma and addictions and...
Those are a lot of the courses that I teach, you know, the clinical trauma addiction courses, but they teach everything there.
Right. You are not shy to have a good conversation, correct?
I appreciate raw life and living and honesty, and I think we're better off not running from ourselves, even though we constantly do it. But yes, I appreciate a real conversation.
Right. So what we're going to do is we're going to take a deep dive into some serious conversations. I want to welcome you to the struggle.
Thank you for having me. It's an honor.
Thank you. Thank you very much. So before we are going to start talking about the subjects, I want to talk about the fact that you're also a director of a therapy center, a wellness center in Williamsburg, New York, correct?
Yes. ODA Wellness
Center, which is very, very famous, and it's a big one. It's not a small center. Now, what I want to talk about is there's a lot of things that need to be discussed that maybe we can help some people if we bring it up and help people how to navigate if they have certain challenges. So before everything, who is walking through those doors? Is it young people, middle-aged people, young parents? Who is being serviced at this ODA Wellness Center?
It's everybody. We have, as of September, Meretz Hashem will have 45 therapists.
Wow.
And as of now, we have no availability. We're booked. So people are working really hard. And we really have, most clinics like ours are primarily focused on children, because that's where there's like a comfort within the community to say, you know, here's my child, he's struggling with something, and fix him now. Fix him now, and then everything's going to be okay. Right. Our clinic primarily services adults.
Wow.
And of course, we're also servicing children.
Right.
But we work with children in the context of the broader family.
That is a huge step in that community. For adults to remove a little bit of the stigma, to come and to want to get help. This is like a step in the right direction.
I'm humbled by it every day.
Wow.
I think that we had like a deliberate effort to challenge the stigma, do everything we possibly could to speak out against it. I think one of the earlier things that we encountered was we have the center, and many of these clinics, they'll have like these like dividers, these separations. People come in, and I actually felt that contributed to some of the shame, as opposed to fighting it. Right. And I felt like, and this is when we had 5 therapists. We didn't have 45. Right. And I felt like in order for this to be successful, we're going to have to create a space where this is okay.
You made it like an open floor plan.
Open floor plan.
Wow.
My office is in the waiting room. So all the clients, they see me coming and going. I'm checking in. How are you doing?
And it makes a lot of sense because the people come in and they see other people. You come in like you come into a medical doctor. There's nothing wrong with that.
Yeah.
It is an interesting concept.
Yeah, that's my belief.
They used to have like 2 doors. One is coming in, one is coming out. You go, it's private. You know, it's but this is an interesting concept. I like it.
Yeah, I listen, I honor the fact that there's shame with going to therapy at times. There is, because it's like indicative of there's a problem.
Right.
But I think the best way we could fight it is speak about humanity in an open way, so we're not running from these things.
So let's start with the young people. Young people coming in.
When you say young people, we're talking about children?
No, we're talking about the
young adults.
Young adults,
okay.
Yeah, couples, like young couples coming in. And I want to talk about this idea since you're in, how many years are you doing this?
I'm going into my 6th year. I've been working with the Hasidic community for all of my career.
Right. And I know you write even articles. Do you have in a Yiddish newspaper, you have an article
in the Nafshi, I have an article.
Yeah, I see your thing.
And also we have a show on Kolma Wasser.
Right, also,
we're trying to bring these ideas to the community. And again, I don't look at this as I have what to share with you. Right. I think it works both ways. The community gives me a tremendous amount too.
Let me ask you about, you've seen a lot of parents, you've seen a lot of families, you've seen, what about toxic parents, controlling parents, and what kind of effect does it have on the upbringing of the child coming out from a house like that?
I know that you're very interested in the topic of narcissism.
Yeah.
And when you're raised by like a narcissistic parent, that's the whole process is about them. Yeah. You have to remember that Hashem gives us these beautiful children that we get to raise so they can become their own people. Right. We don't own them.
They're gifts. They're not ours.
There's gifts that we nurture so they could then do the gift of nurturing somebody else.
Correct.
But let's say you're raised where that's not at all the story. No. You're raised with the parent as the center of attention. No. It's the beginning even of narcissism in the children.
Right.
Because in order for them to justify their own existence, they have to be the center of the universe. And when that happens, it's quite devastating. When we don't find a way to relay over to our kids that they're, number one, their own people, and we need to listen to their thoughts, their opinions, their feedback, then we're sending another message instead, which is like, you belong to me and you need to do as I say.
Right.
Again, we need to have rules in a home. You need to have expectations in a home. I think that's something that's getting lost a little bit in modern psychology. It's no expectations, do as you please, find yourself. And the truth is, people need some stability in their lives, some degree of an expectation.
Right.
They need to be told that there was a disappointment at some point so they could think about that behavior and refine that character.
Right.
That doesn't mean you impose it. It means that you introduce it so they could think about themselves and how they're living.
Right. Do you find that in the community or outside the community that there is the pressure for parents to control the house is because they're living in a community that everything needs to be, we have to fit in?
Like we were saying before, definitely it creates an added pressure.
Right.
When every behavior,
even if the parents are not that controlling, but you can't go out like this or whatever. It comes with this beauty that living in a community, and not because there's a lot of stuff that you pay a price when you leave the community. You're opening up your life to a whole different world. But there's a price to pay being in the community.
Yeah, we have to acknowledge any ideology that is extreme, and let's call it Hasidus. Right. There are different levels of what it means to be a practicing Jew, and Hasidus is the top. Right. It means I'm dedicating my whole being to my spirituality. Right. Kierkegaard is a philosopher from the 1600s. Right. He said that almost every meaningful decision that we make is, am I doing it for myself to satisfy my physical being, or am I doing it for God? Right. And Hasidus sort of takes the stance of, I want everything to be about doing it for God. So that's a very demanding way of living.
But it's also it's doing it for God will give you individuality, though, if you really mean it the right way.
Correct.
But if you're doing it for an organization, or you're doing it because you belong someplace, that's where the pressure comes in. You follow what I'm saying?
Absolutely, 100%.
Because Hasidus, let's say if you do Hasidus the way Hasidus is meant to be, you don't really care what the neighbors say, because you live with God.
Yeah. Yeah, like pshischa.
Yeah,
Like,
yeah.
oh, this is
You
do it originally.
Yeah,
That's it.
if you live with God, will give you individuality. It's when sometimes you use God, or sometimes, because it's sort of saying, we have a business to run over here,
Yeah.
and this is the way it's supposed to be in order for it to be successful.
Yeah, but over time, and this is always complicated, like we can't always live in a state of revolution. Hasidus is a revolution.
Right.
It was like fighting a particular system that wasn't working. And they're saying we need to elevate that experience.
Right.
And those original people chose it. They actually left a different way of life,
Right.
moved over and said, I'd rather serve Hashem this way.
Right.
Over time, all those ideas, they become rote, they become just part of the fabric of the people. I think I speak to many of the therapists that I work with who are Hasidim. Right. They say, we know that you learn a lot more Hasidus than we do.
Right, because
and I do. At least a few hours a week, I'm learning Hasidus. Right. And like, that's my inspiration. That's where I get these things from. But like,
this is a little bit different. This is more of culture, right?
Yeah,
this is more culture.
This is not Hasidus.
This is not Hasidus. That's what I'm saying. The pressure that parents have comes from, it puts a lot of pressure on them. And it puts a lot of pressure on the children.
Yeah. People have asked all the time, like, what do you see the most of? And it's really in this direction that you're talking about. It's like a form of anxiety that is connected to perfectionism, like just a fear of one's shadow.
Right.
Like, I don't want to think about feeling, I just want to make sure I'm doing it right.
Right.
And that comes from the demands within a way of being. But again, I needed to remind us that this is a phenomenon that happens with any intense ideology. So on the Upper West Side, let's say, where there's also an intense ideology.
Up to the Joneses.
Yeah. Imagine you have, we talk about all the open-mindedness. You know, imagine you have one of those people. They're very wealthy, doing great. And you have a kid who wants to become a guitar player in a band.
Right.
Or I want to become a street artist.
Right.
They'd go through exactly the same crisis as what's happening in Williamsburg or Borough Park or Muncie. It's a human phenomenon.
Right.
It's not a specific phenomenon. I think that's something that I've so enjoyed learning about, that there's a universal human experience.
Right.
We're all in this.
All the same.
Yeah, it different environments activate different parts, focus on different parts, and create different problems. So we have our problems, and they have their problems, but we're all trying to figure it out at all times.
So how should a person live if a person wants to live a life fulfilled, content, in their own community? Talking about people from the Upper West Side or talking about people from Williamsburg. How can a person build himself up to a point that he should live life fully where he is?
I could tell you I'm working on it.
Okay.
When I figure that out, we'll have that discussion. But I think the goal is to work on it.
Right.
To seek more. I don't meet too many people. First of all, I've never really met people who didn't have some degree of humility or suffering in their lives. Right. And I certainly don't meet too many people who are living in a constant state of bliss.
Right.
Where like I've arrived at that. And I don't think we're asked to be in that place.
It's a work in progress.
Yeah, the problem is we're not generally honest about things like that. We're like we want to portray to the world that everything is wonderful. And I think that's one of the reasons why I allow myself to talk about my own human struggle in open environments, because I just feel like that's a common human experience.
Right.
And why are we trying our best to make pretend like that's not there? Like, anyone who wakes up every morning and feels great, and who's like, and faces the day, this is going to be amazing.
Right.
I wake up days like that. I also wake up other days where I'm feeling lost and depressed and fearful, and that's the reality of life. And I think we're all doing that.
Sure.
We just don't talk about it.
Right. And you got to work on it. You got to get up every day and work on it.
You work on it. You work on it. There is, I believe, a place we could all arrive that's truly authentic to us.
Right.
Within any world that we live in. Yeah. And I believe that. And I think our goal is to genuinely pursue that. And hope that we could access it and utilize it, but also know that tomorrow's another day.
Right.
And we might not feel that way, and that's okay.
What would you say to parents who are working on themselves while raising their kids? They're not done with themselves yet, and they have to raise kids.
But that's all of us. Yeah, but the gift of a child seeing a parent who's willing to acknowledge that they need to work on themselves, the gift of that is wonderful. I think we're all like that. Who's arrived at a place where, okay, I don't need to work on myself anymore. The day I don't need to work on myself, that's the day I expire. That's like my time is up. I did it, you know?
So what you're saying is it's not a pressure. It's not something bad. It's something that you can even share with the kids. It's a beautiful concept that you can share with your kids that we're doing this together.
Yeah.
I'm becoming better every day and you're becoming better every day. And we're doing this. It shouldn't be something, shouldn't have fear of how am I raising my kids while I have to still do work on myself.
100%. And I think if you ask our kids, the ones that we were able to speak that way to them, and they'll tell you it was of the greatest gift. Now, I don't think you need to. Sometimes parents take this idea way too far and they kind of make their child their spouse. Like they share everything with them. We have to maintain a sense of balance. I'm a parent and you're a child and it's my job to raise you. That means I'm not going to share everything with you. But I think when which child doesn't grapple at some point with tefillah? At some point, just like, what does it all mean? We're doing the same thing every day, 3 times a day. It could wear on somebody in that regard. And for them to hear from a parent, like, this is a complicated thing. I'm working on it. I'm trying to figure. I'm fighting my way through this. We're in the struggle. You know, that's the podcast. Right. We're struggling. The gift we could give our children.
That's a gift. That is a gift that
I struggle. We struggle.
What about the fact that yeshivas schools are rejecting the kids? Or let's say if a kid is, whatever, rebellious and they're being rejected. Sometimes the kids are rejected because of the parents. And sometimes the child is rejected because of the child. How is a child supposed to handle that?
Well, I can tell you how they do handle it.
Okay.
Horrifically. There's no other way to say it. I just heard a story today. Someone was talking about how they literally went back to their Rosh Hashiva who rejected them years later and like gave them a piece of their mind as to what that did. And what that means is they hold on to that for years.
For years,
That type of rejection. And also bear in mind that very often the kids that are struggling in this way, chances are they're already dealing with some elements of rejection.
From before.
Yeah, when a kid is acting out, it's not arbitrary. It's not meaningless.
No.
They're acting out. That's their way of communicating with us. Hey, there's a problem. And it's precisely that kid that's trying to get into that school that is rejected. But I do want to say that I think institutions are allowed to have values and they're allowed to have their own set of expectations. And very often, parents are wanting their kids to go to schools for themselves, not for their kids. And sometimes schools are, let's say, left with a very difficult decision of what do we do in a situation like that. So I don't live in a world where I'd say like, okay, there's no such thing as not letting a kid into a school. You have a kid who's not capable of a certain level of learning.
Or what you're saying is the parents they have expectations that I would want my kid in this school, but it really doesn't belong there. Because of the parent himself also.
Yeah.
He's not in reality is what you're saying.
Yeah, and they need it not because that's what the child needs.
Right.
And that's not even necessarily good for the child.
Right.
And many people would tell them that.
Right.
But they need it because I need my child to go to this place.
School,
I need a kid in Alexander.
Right.
That's where I need my kid to go because that reflects well on me.
Right.
Without necessarily asking, like, would my kid do well in such an environment?
Right.
And I think, thank God, there's enough different types of schools that should, in theory, be able to accommodate. And we need schools for kids who are struggling, and we need schools for kids who are mitzuyanim. We do. Right. And I was lucky to go to a school that had both in the same class. But I wonder how it impacted the other kids. You know, we had kids in my class that were in keeping Shabbos, and we had kids that were finishing Shas, and they were all in this. It was a very unique environment. Wow. And but it very rarely lasts. It doesn't exist for very long, So I think we need many different environments. But the devastation of that rejection
is beyond. I had a Chabad mechanech was here, and he was telling me that I think the Rebbe told him that if you have to reject somebody from school or did something that is a raidif or whatever, you can't keep hold them. But you better make sure that kid has where to go.
Yeah.
Don't just throw him out and just leave him on the street.
Not only that, take him there. Take him there. Drive, get in your car.
Make sure that kid has a place, not by you, someplace else, but just don't. just don't reject like that, because that's gonna affect the children to no end.
Yeah. Yeah, I know some beautiful stories of people who were not appropriate for a certain environment, and it was dealt with beautifully.
Wow.
Now, I know many, many more stories that are horrific, and they were just outright rejected, and that's terrible. But I know people have been through that experience, and it was okay. They're still in touch with the people who kicked them out because it was done with dignity. And one special man, he literally got in a car and drove to Florida to speak to the Rosh Hashiva, who didn't want to get this kid in. And the Rosh Hashiva let him in because he literally got in his car and drove there. Yeah. I mean, can you imagine you're that kid who hears that, yes, I'm getting kicked out and I'm in New York, but I also know that the person kicking me out got in his car and drove to Florida to speak to the Rosh Hashiva to get me in.
To get me into school.
He's more in touch with the guy who kicked him out than he is with the person who accepted him.
Correct. Amazing, amazing stuff. Do you deal with rebellious teens also?
Yeah, for absolutely. You know, again, we have some wonderful organizations in our community that deals with them.
Right. But do you feel that when you see a kid like that, are they searching for a deeper meaning, these kids, or is it just they want to be a free spirit?
I don't think it's either. If you ask me, I think that very sensitive souls, which often what these kids are, they're obviously searching for something, but I don't think they're consciously aware of that search. I think that is their expression of the pain that they're in. That's just what's happening. They're letting you know that they're hurting. Right. And almost always that's the case. A rebellious child, it's not like a natural order. It happens when there's what to rebel against and what to be angry about or what to be hurt about. And I've never met a kid who was like rebellious in that way, who didn't have a story to tell.
Right.
You know, so I don't think they're consciously searching for something. But underneath it all is that search. And we need to find a way to meet them there too sometimes.
Right. Now, as far as bullying in school, children who are being bullied or the bulliers, do you find that bullying, if a child comes to school like that, is it a result of what is going on in the home?
That the child is bullying another?
Yeah.
Well, we know that. We know that bullying and anger or aggression is what we call a learned behavior.
Right.
It's not something that is like natural to the fabric of a person.
Right.
So almost always they're sort of playing out what they know or what they've seen. And when I say what they know and seen, it means we're all faced with many different situations. Yeah. And we see our parents responding to them. So if we learn that this is the response to this experience that I'm in, that's a learned behavior. We just sort of embody that and it becomes the way that we live.
So what I'm hearing from you is to solve the bullying problem is to focus on the child who is bullying and figure out what's going on with this child at home.
It's one of the ways. I think we also need to create protective environments. I think even though, of course, if a person's bullying somebody else, they're obviously carrying their own pain.
Right.
And that's why they're doing that.
Right.
But I also think like that doesn't give them the right to hurt another person. And it's a real point, by the way, because we talk a lot about trauma in the world. And because a person has suffered, it doesn't necessarily give them the right to cause suffering to another. And yes, we could help them understand it. Like, this is why you're causing that suffering. But the objective is to find a way to not do that. Right. And so we're ultimately creating a next generation that is raised in a different set of environments.
Right. Now, as far as teachers and melamdim with students, how important is it to have a close relationship? They should understand that this is lives are on the line over here.
I think people learn the best when they're touched by the person who's teaching them things. But I would imagine today the people that you could learn from are people that you possibly feel seen by.
Correct.
And things like that. So there's no question that, and they did this with studies with cheating on tests, and where they'd evaluate your likelihood of cheating based on the relationship you have with that person. And what time and again, what these studies show is that if you like the person, you're much less likely to cheat.
Wow.
And so cheating, you think, is like just self-serving.
You just want to win, yeah.
I just want to have the better grade than the guy next to me, but turns out it's not really the case. But again, I think those ideas, what you're saying right now, haven't necessarily intergenerationally been passed down, that is the most critical thing. Right. I think it's emerging today.
Right.
Yeah, but I think they're learning it a little bit from the outside, not necessarily from the inside.
Right.
And to me, real change comes from the inside, not the outside. And I need to stay humble in that way. Like I could do everything I possibly can, but I can never touch what one Rav could do within the community. It'll be much more significant than anything I could do.
Now, in teachers and rabbis and Rosh Hashivas have to, I mean, I don't know if this is a skill that you can learn, but the sensitivity part.
Of course you could learn it.
I mean,
of course, but life will teach you that.
If you don't have it in you.
Yeah, if you weren't, let's say, treated sensitively, or no one told you that that's a value, then it becomes like, what are you talking about?
Right.
And I've sat like the last few years, there's a wonderful program in Williamsburg called Vaharav. Mm-hmm. And I sat together with like their teachers, their rabbeim, and we sit together once a week and learn about some of these ideas. And it's a wonderful experience to have, because many are describing like, we don't hear this on a regular basis.
Right.
Like, that's not what we've been told.
Right.
But I think today it's being heard, but often from other sources.
From outside.
And that to me is a problem. Like, we should hear these things from the inside.
Right.
And we are, but we need the voice to get louder, I imagine.
Right. Now let's talk about what your specialty is. I want to talk about trauma. What is trauma? That's the question.
Yeah, the fundamentals of trauma. Trauma is an experience largely where you're either completely treated poorly and dishonored and disrespected, abused, not taken care of as a person. You were treated as an object.
Even
as opposed
something
to a
little
person.
like disrespect, even something like that could be trauma.
Here's a problem, and it's a different discussion. I think that we've abused the term trauma.
Okay.
Like, trauma at this point has become a catch-all phrase for any type of discomfort. And to me, there are people who've been deeply, deeply traumatized, and they can wear that title with a badge of honor. Right. And then you have those that have hurt. We all hurt. Yeah. That is sort of making its way into that reality as well. But trauma, the way I fundamentally understand it, is what it does to us, not necessarily what we went through.
Right.
How it shapes our perception of the world and ourselves.
Right.
So
the actual trauma, let's call it, the actual that abuse or whatever is happening that made it into a trauma, so it's a car accident or whatever, it was a trauma. The question is, what do you do with that? Do you have somebody to sit down with and, okay, this is what happened. Someone sees you, someone hears you, someone feels you.
So there, again, when it comes to treatment, let's say what you were talking about with a car accident, let's say your life is great. Right. You get into a car accident and you get like flashbacks from that experience. Right. I experienced this recently, and it was interesting because knowing things and then going through it, you get to observe it.
Right.
So I was in where I lived. There's a wonderful shul over there, and they have a tent on the outside. And when we were having the kiddush on Shabbos afternoon, the whole tent collapsed. A tree fell on top, and it actually knocked me like at the top of my neck. Oh. Thank God it didn't hit me directly in my head. I don't know what would have happened, but it knocked me out. Wow. I fell to the floor. Wow. And that's what you call like a traumatic moment. No one did anything wrong. Right. It was an act of God. But something happened that moment. And I found myself like for a few days having like flashbacks of that. And my body was freezing. It was a real reality. And the way we understand trauma, it impacts a lot of things, but it certainly impacts our body. It impacts our visceral response. And we somehow need to find a way to let that go in order for us to begin to move forward. Right. The trauma that I'm speaking about is not necessarily the PTSD. It's more the ongoing, pervasive. You're raised in an environment where you're just treated like an object, or you're not valued as a person, or you're being told on a regular basis that you're horrific, or even in subtle ways, where you're raised by a narcissist parent, who the whole world
good enough.
Yeah, so the way you internalize that is that you start seeing the world through that lens that's been given over to you. And you live with certain beliefs about yourself that I'm fundamentally bad. There's something fundamentally flawed. If anyone were to really, really know the person I am, they would outright reject me. Yeah. So you live in a world where you're on the outside of it, and almost always on the outside in a negative way. So that type of work is like really making your way through that experience and understanding the factors that contributed to that understanding that you're living with. And it's shocking for people very often. Like they'll say like, well, it's because I went through something that was bad that I feel this way, as opposed to me being bad.
Right.
You know, there's certain lines you don't want to hear in therapy.
Right.
You know, in sexual abuse, you almost never want to hear, well, it wasn't the perpetrator's fault. It was my fault because I went there in the first place. Right. And I returned many times without understanding that that's fundamental. That's what sexual abuse is that they mess with your head in a way that you return, and they make you feel responsible for it. So that person lives in a world of like, I'm the issue. Right. And we need to really help reconstruct all of that and help them find some freedom.
So the work is to unwire that brain from the trauma?
Well, it's
or rewire?
On some level, there's like rewiring certain perceptions, but I think it's also re-understanding or reconceptualizing the narrative of your life. Right. This person looks in the mirror and sees a monster. Right. And helping them understand why they see a monster, what contributed to that reality, which again, I think therapy is criticized for this a lot, because fundamentally what I'm saying is that if someone's living in this very dysfunctional, traumatized way, we kind of need to go back and make sense of how they got there. And almost always it's going to make its way back to some parent narrative and how they were treated. And people say like, oh, therapy's terrible, because they do that. And I think the point that they need to remember with that criticism is that that is a stage. It's not the end game. Right. The goal is to get to a place where you could say that unless a parent is evil, which almost never is the case, where you could say, listen, I know that I'm flawed as a person. I'm trying my best and I'm still hurting my kids. And my parents also got to that place where they were trying their best and they didn't know, and that contributed to a lot of my pain. Right. That's, in theory, a goal we want to get to, a place where we could have compassion and empathy for ourselves and for others in our lives. Right. But it's a stage. You need to go through the stage. Sometimes people get worse at the beginning stages of therapy in order for them to get better, because they're sort of shedding a lot of this stuff, a lot of the needs, the necessities. I need to do this to be okay.
Right. You were mentioning before that during the trauma, you keep on going back. That is called trauma bonding, right?
I was talking about PTSD,
right?
Traumatic
going
bonding.
Back to but trauma bonding means going back to a person.
Yeah, going back to a scenario, going back to a person, that precisely the thing that caused that pain.
Caused that problem. So, what is trauma bonding? Why would a person want to do that? And what is the difference from real love to trauma bonding? Because that person will tell themselves that I really love that person.
Yeah, their feelings in that moment, the sensations they have would likely mimic.
During the trauma.
Yeah.
And that person will tell themselves that this is real love. He goes back. Yeah. But there's a huge difference. It's trauma bonding.
Correct.
Why is that so powerful, the trauma bonding? What is going on in a person's brain?
It's almost like I don't know, do you have like a favorite food, a food that provides you with comfort? Gives you something, a warm feeling. Yeah. I know for myself, we were sitting Shiva for my mother, and it was like 2:00 in the morning. I'm sitting in the kitchen with a few of my siblings, and one of my brothers asked the question. He said, like, this is your last final meal. What is it going to be? And what was amazing is that there were 3 of us in the conversation at that moment, and we all said fish sticks and mashed potatoes.
That was your favorite.
Well, that was like a comfort food.
Yeah, the comfort food.
Like, that sort of reminds me.
Yeah, from the
house. My mother was a therapist, and she had her office in the house itself, and we would have this little toaster in the kitchen, and we weren't allowed to go into the kitchen when she was in therapy because they would hear and it wasn't. Noise, yeah. And so we would try to like put all the fish sticks in the toaster oven and time it exactly. You get there before the ding. Right. Because you know if that ding went off, you're like,
kill it.
Oh, we're in trouble. Yeah. So I think even a part of that contributed to the story of the comfort that one gets. And a part of what happens to an individual when they're going through something that they can't quite understand is there's a need to revisit an experience that ultimately at some point gives them comfort because it's familiar. And they could return to that. We see that a lot with victims of sexual abuse.
That's what I'm saying. It's fascinating because here the victim knows it's wrong.
Sure. We've all been through a lot.
Yeah.
But all those experiences, when we could tolerate them, they're our teachers. They're our greatest teachers.
Sure.
Some of the greatest teachers I've ever had have been the pain that I feel in my heart. It's taught me things about life.
Right. Now, here is where the people, they throw around the word attachment.
Yeah.
Attachment is what? Attachment is to other human beings?
Well, attachment starts by what we're given. Attachment is essentially a gift. Your parents either give it to you or they withhold it from you.
Right. So now, is attachment a good thing?
Oh, absolutely. So let's talk about attachment.
It is a positive thing. Yeah, let's talk about it.
So I always loved Bowlby. Bowlby was one of the original researchers on attachment. And he always described an analogy where he said, like, there are two ways for a parent to look at a child. And we were talking about this a little bit before, but either you look at that child and you see through their eyes, you get straight to their neshama.
Right.
And you almost tell yourself, like, thank you, Hashem, for giving me such a child. And you get curious about the child. Right. I wonder what you'll be like, what you're going to have to face in your life, what your characteristics are. But you see them as outside of you. So when you're raising a child in that way, as Bowlby talks about, the child absorbs the feeling that you're giving over to them. They become that feeling. So when they have to face uncertainty, they have to go on a job interview, there's like an internal belief that was given to them to some degree as a gift that even if this doesn't go well, you're still okay. Or even if this is hard, you have what it takes to withstand it. It's internalized.
Right.
And then the other way Bowlby describes, you look at that child and instead of seeing through the eyes into their soul, you see their eyes as a reflection, almost like a mirror. You look at yourself. And instead of saying, I wonder what you're going to be, you say, I wonder how you're going to represent me in the world. And I wonder how you're going to make me look good or you're going to make me look bad. That is also internalized. And think about how disorienting that is for a person, that their whole identity becomes about what they do, what their achievements might be, as opposed to who they are fundamentally. Right. And that plays out throughout life, which is fascinating. When we look at the research of attachment, it often is formed the first year of life, which means you don't even have an awareness. You don't even know that it's happening. But the correlational studies that they have with that speak about what happens 20 years later when that person is, imagine two people dating. You have one person, there's a sense of security and a knowing and a feeling of I'm valuable, and another person who's walking around uncertain of their own shadow.
Right.
And consider how those two people walk into a marriage. And that is formed early stages of life. Yeah. And that plays out in all relationships. So anxious attachment will play out in an anxious way, fearful and codependent, so to speak. Yeah. I need you to make me feel whole.
Right.
As opposed to Eric Frum talks about this, the two immature love versus mature love.
Right.
Immature love is if I don't have you, I'm nothing, which is another definition of codependency. Yeah. And mature love is I have a self, you have a self, and we choose to join one another in communion. And that's important to us. And we see that as a value. But yourself is not coming through the other. It's coming through your own being and the way that you've lived. And then you get to share that with another. It's a very different story. Right. And that's all an attachment story. It's really what it is.
Right. How close is attachment to addiction?
Well, you'll almost always find people who are addicts have
these attachment.
Yeah. It's it's interesting when you go to, let's say, a 12-step meeting. Yeah. And you ask the people, like, what's the felt sense? What's the fundamental experience in there? They'll describe, even when they talk about their drugs. I'll share a story. I had one of my first clients that was like a heavy drug addict. Yeah. He was using heroin at the time. Right. And special guy. He was homeless and lots of good stories I could tell about him. Mm-hmm. But I remember asking him, because I read in the textbooks what heroin was like, and I knew that all the catchphrases, heroin feels better than anything else in the world, and it's great. And I was curious about it, and I asked the guy, "Can you describe to me the feeling, the sensation you got when you take that needle, you stick it into you mainline it and straight to your brain?" Yeah. And I was thinking he would tell me about the pleasure and the euphoria and the joy and the calm. His response to me was, When I take heroin, I feel as if the world is holding me. I feel contained. I feel love. Now, when you know this guy's story and the absence of love that he's had and the attachment deficiencies that he's lived with, that statement makes a lot of sense. So on some level, drug use is like an attachment kind of disorder. I don't get the warmth from anything else.
Right.
This is the thing that gives me that comfort. And that's where it starts. And then we need to find ways to get that in other healthier means, as opposed to, because the drug will never really satisfy that.
Right.
You get the sensation, but it won't fix or cure anything.
It's a temporary fix.
Yeah.
And why do you think so many people, you probably heard this from a lot of people, that they're in relationships in which were toxic and this were not good for them. And they're like, oh, I didn't realize it till years later.
The way I interpret that statement is I didn't see myself as valuable enough to kind of fight the way I was being treated. I think they're very well aware that they're not being treated well. Yeah. I think people live with a deep awareness.
That makes a lot of sense. Again, it's codependency.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's rooted in codependency, what you just said.
Yeah. I think on some level they believe that they deserve that behavior. And so long as you believe you deserve it, you don't question it.
Right.
You believe, this is what I'm supposed to get. And if someone treated me well, I wouldn't quite know what to do with that. And you see that all the time. You see people who were raised like in very tough environments, and then they're only attracted to people who are treating them poorly. Yeah. You're like, what is going on?
Right.
Why wouldn't you fantasize about something different?
Yeah.
But that's where their love comes from.
Right.
And it's simply because that's what they know, and that's what they expect to be treated as.
Right. So let's say in a relationship or in a marriage, how does abuse look like? Because you can hear from people who are saying, listen, everyone is fighting. Everyone's crazy. I'm crazy. You're crazy. Everyone makes it work. Where does a person know that this is abuse?
Abuse is characterized as a power differential, that someone who's of greater power is harming a person of lesser to some degree.
That's brilliant. Because what you're saying is, let me tell you if I hear you correctly, what you're saying is that in a relationship, it has to be level.
Yes. Yes. And when it's level and you disagree, you could hear the other side.
Correct.
When it's like this, you're not even entitled to share a voice. Right. And that's really what abuse is about, where it comes from.
That's where abuse and control comes in.
Yeah, because every relationship has some degree of discord and disagreement, and that's okay. That's how we grow up. Right. You know, people want to avoid those things their whole lives, but then how do you expect to mature? You mature through conflict and discord. You know, it's one of the things they say about addiction, that like whenever the person started the drug use, that's the developmental stage that they're going to be at. And I see that all the time, that if someone started when they were 15 and now they're 25, but they've been using the whole time, then often psychologically it's like you're kind of talking to a 15-year-old.
Right.
And the way I understand that is we become 25 from 15 by facing challenging moments, resolving them, working through them, and maturing as a result. But if, let's say, you're high most of the time, you're avoiding all that process. So when there's conflict, you just avoid it. I've met with people who said, I've never fight with my spouse. Right. And then when you really dig and you listen, it's like, oh, you're not fighting because you're stoned.
Yeah, you're not here.
Yeah. I just want to throw in, I think there's too many people smoking marijuana these days.
Yeah. I am with you.
It's terrible.
I think it's a terrible thing. People laugh at me when I say it.
I don't think marijuana is terrible. I think there are way too many people using so much more.
What's behind it?
You see, what's behind the problem?
Yeah, where's the running away from?
I think that's a sign of our times. We're running.
We're running.
This is one of the ways that we run. Yeah.
We don't want to face it. And that's what I was going to ask you. How does someone develop an addiction? There's a kid, 13, 14, 15, 16 years old. All of a sudden, he's an addict. 20 years old, he's an addict. A 35-year-old is an addict. How does someone develop an addiction? How does he become an addict? What must happen?
Yeah. Well, to me, addiction is largely a symptom. It's not the problem itself.
Correct.
So you become an addict by suffering enough and finding relief in a behavior or a drug
Right.
that gives you some comfort for the moment. That's how you become an addict.
Right.
But you don't become an addict when I always struggle with, like you see in Mishpacha magazine or Ami, which are wonderful publications. But when sometimes they'll describe very complex phenomena in a very simple form, like, oh, this kid was great, top bacher.
Right.
And then one Shabbos, he was left with an open phone that wasn't filtered. And by the time Sunday hit, full out sex addict.
Right.
And I'm like, come on. That's
no
just
sense.
not the story.
Yeah.
Now, exposure is complicated.
Yeah.
But that's just not the story.
Makes sense.
Because a guy who's healthy enough, balanced enough, could also look at the other side. He could also say, even let's say with marijuana, he could say, this feels good. But I also understand that there are other things that come along with it. So I need to be careful with it.
Right.
And an addict won't ever consider that.
No.
An addict will be like, this feels good. When can I feel good again?
Correct.
Because I'm feeling like garbage all the time.
So what's your message for young people who are going through a hard time? This is what life is all about. Everybody's going through hard times. But not to fall in to what you see, to what you're dealing with. What would you tell this little kid? How should he channel his difficulties and his challenges to not fall down that pit?
It's a complicated reality. These are things we honor too. We honor that type of suffering. To me, we all need good role models in our lives. We need people that we could be honest with and share ourselves with. And that would be like my greatest recommendation. Find someone that you could trust.
Right.
And almost always, when you speak to people who've suffered that way, there's no one that
There's no one there.
There's no one that they feel like they could trust. That's the world that they live in.
What you're saying is that even if you can't find your parent or your mother, find someone else.
Find someone. Find a Rebbe. Find a mentor.
Wow,
that you could share what it is that's going on. Help develop the language of what's happening on the inside, and express that. And it's okay. It's okay. We struggle. We're imperfect people.
Right.
And the goal is to get a little bit better.
Right. Now, also, I was going to ask you about if a person is a good person by nature, good person, wants to do good, he wants to make a difference, but he finds himself being a people pleaser. He finds himself pleasing everybody and saying yes to everything. Where can he find a balance between being a good person to running around for validation and to being a people pleaser?
I think you're describing the pathology of most therapists I know.
Okay.
Where there's an element of codependency that exists in almost all therapists.
Wow.
And it makes sense, meaning they spend their entire lives listening to other people's struggles, and that's where they get their satisfaction from.
Right.
That's precisely the definition of codependency. At ODA, we do these big trainings every year, and we brought in one of the foremost experts in trauma. Her name is Marilyn Murray, and she does all these different exercises with us, something called like a trauma egg, where you really visit everything. And basically she arrives at the conclusion with almost all therapists in the room, codependency.
Wow.
And I remember sharing at the end where I acknowledged, I said, listen, I have some codependent elements in me. I love sitting with people who are struggling and listening to them and honoring their voice in that moment. It does something for me as a person.
Right.
And I'd be lying if I'd say it doesn't,
Right.
if it didn't.
Right.
But I was sharing at the end, I said, like, I acknowledge my codependency, but I would still choose it. I would still do it because it's special.
Right.
And inherently, to listen to another is a meaningful thing. But I think when you're describing is a person who hasn't developed enough of a self to be able to say no, where I know where I begin and I know where I end, and I know where I'm good and I know where I'm bad, and I could differentiate between those things.
Right.
And that's a lot of work for a person to do. But codependency, and fundamentally, on developmental stages, it sort of comes from this phenomenon we're talking about, that you needed to fundamentally take care of others, and that's how you secured your own love. That by caring for another, Alice Miller in The Drama of the Gifted Child talks about this a lot, where she said, like, you were raised by a somewhat insecure person who couldn't acknowledge it. So they needed you to be a certain way for them in order for them to feel okay. Mm-hmm. And then a part of your identity becomes, for me to feel okay, I need to somehow take care of others. And The Drama of the Gifted Child is a book written about therapists.
Right.
They're calling them codependents.
Right.
And I think we're probably better off acknowledging some of our shortcomings, and that's one of them.
Now, what I'm hearing from you is that to heal codependency, the answer is self-esteem.
Yeah.
Which means that you have to grow to a certain level, that you have to feel good and being okay with saying no, with having boundaries. And that is really the solution for codependency.
The only way you could do that is with a self-esteem.
Is building yourself up.
Yeah, because if in your mind, if I say no to this person, then I'm bad in their eyes, or I'm disappointing them in some way, you can't tolerate that.
Right.
But if there's a self in there,
Right.
then you could say, yes, I may be disappointing another, but I also know that that's not for me.
Right.
And that's okay. But that requires a degree of self.
Now, here's the $1 million question. For someone who is 20 years a codependent, how is he building his self-esteem?
Painfully. One tiny step at a time. Experientially, by learning to set some of those boundaries. But I think even more than externally setting boundaries, it's internally going through that very complex, deep process of how did I end up this way? And then who am I for real?
Right.
And starting to ask those questions are wonderful for a person, but they're very disorienting for a codependent.
It's excruciating.
Yeah. Yeah. I embrace my codependency.
Right.
I challenge it, and I try to find those boundaries, but I also know that that's likely going to remain a part of me to some degree.
Now, the 12-step program that you're very familiar with because you're dealing with all these traumas and addictions.
Sure.
There is a lot of spirituality in there. A lot of God, a lot of surrender, and a lot of powerlessness.
Mm-hmm.
Now, what's your opinion as far as bringing in this to help the codependent, coupled up with these questions that you were saying before, knowing that, for us, we're Yidden, we believe that we are a Chaylik Elokayim Mao, we're part of the Ribbono Shel Olam, we are not here to serve anybody else, we are here to serve the Ribbono Shel Olam, and it gives you a feeling of yourself. If you connect to the Ribbono Shel Olam, you know you have a mission. We're here for a very short period of time.
Yeah.
How is that part of the 12-step program helping a codependent build their self-esteem?
You're saying how would that actually work? Yeah. The idea of, first of all those ideas that you're describing are very present in those rooms, talking about God. And I think one thing we need to know, a codependent or an addict, it's hard to say that they can't serve Hashem, but they're serving another God.
The codependents and the addicts.
100%.
That is so true.
Their understanding, their relationship with Hashem is very different. And I don't really believe that you could fundamentally be like a Frum person. I'm not talking about behavior. I'm talking about essentially.
100%.
And at the very same time be an addict.
Wow.
They don't work well together. You need to either decide, is my God the thing that provides me with some degree of security and comfort, or is my God something that is beyond me that I need to work towards?
So you're saying something very profound, because the 12-step program is healing the addict by doing what you just described, by accepting God.
Yeah.
To be God.
And by the way, the beginning of the 12 steps.
Yeah.
It's not like it doesn't...
No, it's not in the back. It's the first...
That's where you start.
Yeah, that's where you start.
You start by saying, on some level, you're saying, like, I need to stop serving a different God. I need to stop serving myself.
Wow.
And I need to humble myself to a degree where I'm actually serving God. And it's a complicated journey. Because many of these people never serve God.
Of course not.
Now, they put on tefillin every day. They did everything that they did.
But they're not
But
connected.
they didn't.
No.
To really serve God, you have to let go of your ego. You have to allow yourself to see something that's beyond you. Encounter the ineffable. But you can't be at the center of that. God's at the center of that.
Yeah.
And we're trying to get closer to that center.
Right. Now, let me ask you something. For a person who is, let's say, a codependent, is in a relationship, in a toxic relationship with a narcissist, or attachment issues. In the books of, when it comes to narcissism, no contact is a huge, huge step. Because
Like you need to break off.
cut them off like no tomorrow. Because the codependent is so sensitive. It takes over, such a sponge, takes over energy from another person, that if you would even put an eye there, you would smell that place. You would be back right where you are, just like an addict. So what do you think about no contact? Because it's very, very complicated, especially when it comes to our community, Kibbutz of M. There is so many things involved, family, close family. What do you think about no contact?
I struggle with it a great deal. I think there's very limited humility in no contact as a principle. I understand where it comes from. There are some people, and this is where I create the line. If you're actively being hurt today,
correct,
then you have a right to protect yourself from being hurt today. But to cut off contact because I was hurt in the past, and that wasn't necessarily dealt with, it's a very different story. I think that's much more self-serving than anything else. I understand the pain that people feel, and they feel like, okay, but I'm speaking ideologically. Ideologically, I don't think that breaking off contact ultimately elevates a person to a place where they feel healthier, more integrated, more flexible. I think they feel relief. But I think there are many ways to feel relief. Meaning, like you're describing, and it's true, it's an accurate description. A codependent, they'll sniff out a look even before you even made it. They'll notice it before, and they'll start apologizing before there was even an accusation. That's how they live fundamentally. And there are ways to build that part of ourselves, to understand what it's about, where it's coming from, and develop it. Sometimes there needs to be a period of time where you say, okay, it's not possible for me to develop this in the presence of another. But I happen to think that the therapy world has contributed to this problem a great deal. Like the self became the most important thing in the world. But we have to remember that a lot of those ideas are coming from like values, like Western values, which again, we all live with, but Western values that the self is the most important thing in the world. And I think one of the most beautiful parts of our community is that we understand that being a part of something bigger than you is really inherently valuable. And that's what connects you to others.
But the healing process really of no contact is what, like you said, while the abuse is going on and while you're on your journey of healing, then sometimes you need to do no contact, but you have to come to the level to be indifferent. You have to come to the level that you forgive yourself to a point that it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. You can show up, you cannot show up. It's to an indifferent type of point. But it's like an addict. It's a full-time, lifetime struggle not to fall back.
Yeah.
So you have to have your antennas up.
Yeah, and I want to throw in another idea. When a child is raised in an environment where their parents have cut off others, that reality becomes a lot stronger for them. It's like when a child is raised statistically, when a child is raised in a divorced home, even though every one of those children are promising themselves, my life is never going to be like this. We also know statistically they're more likely to get divorced themselves because they've been introduced to a reality, an internal reality that's different than the people around them. So it requires a degree of humility when you say, listen, I've been hurt. And I need to acknowledge that hurt, and I need to express that hurt. And I could even ask for some acknowledgement back, which would be such a gift. Instead of fighting this, so many parents are like, it becomes like an ideological war. Listen to your child. Your child was hurt by you. It's okay. I have, with all the good intentions, both of us in this room, I imagine both of us, we love our kids. I live with the reality that with all that love in the world, I'm going to miss something. And in some way, there's going to be some element of a wound. And I hope I have the opportunity one day to acknowledge that and say, I missed something. And there's humility to that. And I think that when you're sending a message of this person hurt me and I'm perfect, I got it all better. Ask yourself, could your child ever express any pain towards you? Or could they ever express that to you? And I think that when we show greater things, we go beyond ourselves, which is the ultimate. And we say, yes, I am carrying that pain. And I understand also that they were flawed and I'm also flawed. And that's okay. So let's try our best, as opposed to like, I got it right, they got it wrong, I'm going to live on my side of the street, they're going to live. There's no humility. in that idea. Now, sometimes it's necessary. You need to get out of something for a period of time.
Right.
But I think ideologically, the concept related to like cutting off is it's a toxic concept. It lacks humility.
So what you're saying is any action that a person does was modeled to him at a younger age, that's what he's doing.
Yeah. It becomes a greater reality. A child raised in a home where their parents cut off their own parents, there's a much greater likelihood that those children will cut off the exact parents that they cut off their own. Like the statistically, that's the case.
It is amazing stuff.
It's a terrible phenomenon.
Amazing stuff.
You know? But sometimes we need it. I just want to say this.
Yeah. Listen, sometimes we need general statements.
Yeah.
I mean, sometimes there are families who are like in such bad shape that you know, it'll put you into a very low, dark place. And sometimes, you know, we needed a bunch of, we need a lot of koyach, you know.
We do. We need Yeshuas.
Let me ask you one final question. Who is your role model?
I have many role models.
Okay.
Starting from and again, many of these role models exist in different ways. Yeah. I don't live in a world where like I'm really idealizing people. Right. This is the perfect person. Right. But lots of people that I learned from. I was raised in a home that was filled with giving and service and tikkun olam. Like that was a premise. Now, it was also complicated. It wasn't a simple home. Right. And I carry a lot of pain from my home too. Right. But there were ideas and concepts and ways of being that I deeply appreciated. I have you've met one of my brothers, Donnie.
Amazing guy.
Amazing human being. Amazing. And literally today, when my sister Chev, she came to the conference. Yeah. She's also doing some of this work today. Just like I feel humbled in her presence. Wow. I have my Rebbe, Rabbi Center, who's just like a fundamental person in my life. Rabbi Brudny is someone that I've learned a great deal from, and I feel just very cherished in his presence. So I have a lot of people that I continue to learn from. But the truth is, I learned so much from my kids, from my clients. I think when we're looking to learn from people, then we find lots of role models.
That is amazing stuff. Dr. Akiva Perlman, I want to thank you. I want to thank you for doing what you're doing. I want to thank you for bringing light into dark places. What you're doing is an act of Hashem. You're not only talking about the struggle, you're sitting with the struggle. You're sitting with these people and you're holding their hands and you're getting them through hard times. It's unbelievable stuff. The Rebbeinu Shalom should give you koyach. The Rebbeinu should give you clarity. You should keep on doing what you're doing and making the world a better place.
Thank you, brother.
Thank you.
It's a dear honor to be here, and it's very clear to me that you're clearly seeking a message of love and embrace and growth and acceptance, and Hashem should continue to give you strength to do what you do.
I really appreciate it. Thank you very much.
Thank you.